I would tell myself to get out of my own way because I think those of us who um, either are just very analytical of ourselves or can be very like internal, um, you start to second guess yourself. Same thing happens with imposter syndrome when you're somewhere. But I think that the biggest thing that you can overcome is the way that you think about yourself and your actions in your own head. So I would tell myself not to worry about like I'm prejudging myself or my decisions or my actions or the way that I present something because I want it to be perfect, or I think that if I mess up, it's the end of the world. When really no one is holding me to this like perfect standard. I think that we're all being asked to do our best, and if you prepare, you're gonna do the best you can. You've been brought to a team for that reason. Um, I would tell myself to stop being in my head about it and just do it. get out of the
Yeah.
get out of my own head and get out of my own like internalized doubt and to just try things. And if it fails, that's why we step up and do something differently. But it's there's so much more positive to reap on the other side of that in trying something.
You're listening to Creative Leadership with Heart, a podcast that inspires people to take action and be the leader they were born to be. I'm Coach Rico, and I'm known for coaching and training executives, leaders, founders, and high performers at Fortune 100 businesses, startups, and more. I'm here to answer your questions about leadership and personal development while also asking you questions that can unlock your untapped potential. What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Creative Leadership with Heart. Today we have Graciela Del Toro, a good friend of mine. She's currently the VP of Creative Operations and Resources at Bond, formerly a Creative Operations lead at Netflix, where we met, and then also formerly of Apple. How are you, Graciela?
I'm good. I'm doing really well.
Thanks again for taking the time, and we will jump right in. So tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey as a creative so far.
Yeah, my journey goes back way back to New York many years ago when I started in advertising. I actually went to school for music, so this was not my original plan. And I found myself a little bit more drawn to TV and film. And that industry pulled me in a bit. And then I also found traditional ad agency advertising. So for a while, I was going through the process of producing commercials and like understanding that world of advertising. And that was an interesting, fun journey that I went on for a while. I moved out west a few years later and found that there wasn't as much production for commercials like being concepted at bigger agencies out here as there was in New York.
Mm-hmm.
Things were shifting. There wasn't as much of an industry for broadcast as there was previously. So I leaned a little bit further into my film roots and eventually found marketing for entertainment. So I was at an agency, a pretty large agency where I kind of cut my teeth on trailers and TV commercials for films and TV. And that was really fun. It was like marrying two of my interests, which were marketing, advertising, and film and entertainment. So that really became like my niche area that I focused in. I jumped around a few different agencies and initially was producing and thought like, okay, well, I'll do the same thing. I'm going to be making creative content, so I'll be a producer. And then I took a different path. I had a family, and I really wanted to make sure that my quality of life and just the balance of what was working for me was going to be what I needed it to be at that time. And I eventually found production management, which was the overall oversight of creative teams, overseeing the general schedule of a lot of the different types of productions that we had at different agencies. Um, and somebody took a chance on me doing it without having any management experience. So it was like a fun thing to jump into and just be like, I guess I'll try it. I'll try managing a creative team. Why not? I usually manage productions and the actual creative work, but now I manage people. So I tried that out and it was a really good fit for me. I enjoyed it thoroughly. And I found that there were things I discovered in it that I didn't realize I was going to love, which were like mentoring and growing people, coaching people through difficult things that were not just creative challenges, but production and like line work challenges and things that
Mm-hmm.
were really different about the industry. So I found a lot of joy in that and did that for several years after. Eventually finding my way to what at the time was my dream job of working at Netflix. So
Mhm.
I started thinking bigger picture operations, and it was a different scope completely. Thinking about the larger, huge machine that was is making creative content in different ways for different formats in different countries, regions, languages. So that was just like a world opening up to me that I was so interested in and dove in headfirst and learned so much. And it was its own crazy path. So
Yeah.
I did that for a while. After that, I bounced around a little bit. I did some consulting. I did some contract work at Apple, and eventually thought, I may be thinking about going back to the agency side, which I wasn't thinking I would do after being on the client side. And it became very clear to me that I just wanted to make sure that I would land somewhere that that had the values that I really felt strongly about, and where I felt like I could actually do some interesting, fun work and grow. So
Mhm.
um, what I didn't think was possible was actually possible. I looked around and found the right fit for me through some people that I knew, and eventually landed at Bond where I'm at right now. So that's
Yeah.
my big journey.
Thank you. Yeah, and there's a lot of stuff that I was just taking notes that I want to get into. Um, but I want to get back into a little bit of your origin story first before going forward with some of that stuff. So you said you were a music major, which I didn't know. I was initially a music major also. Um,
Oh, I
yeah,
didn't
I
know
don't
that either.
remember
That's so
that in the
funny.
interview process. I
How
didn't
do we
remember.
not know this?
Yeah, how did we not know that? But anyways, so what was the dream? So little younger Graciela, what was the dream going into music?
Oh
I didn't think
yeah.
it was being going into ad agencies and entertainment, things like that.
No, it doesn't. I was not dreaming about ad agencies at 18. I initially wanted to produce music. I wanted to be a music producer and be in the
Uh,
studio, and working as eventually as an executive in the record industry. Um, and as I was in college for that, Napster happened. So the industry kind of imploded on itself a bit. And in New York specifically, it was a really tough time to be in the music industry. And I just didn't really love what I was seeing. And the opportunities were not that great out there. So
got it.
that's how I ended up in doing some. I took some classes in music for film, and that was really interesting to me. Like that art form in itself is like so fascinating to me. I still am like very passionate about soundtracks and music for film. That's like a side interest of mine. But I think that the film industry just had a lot more to offer at that time. So I went in that direction and did some. I've always done a little bit of like short film and that type of work on the side. So that was something that I just kind of pulled me in, and then I went that direction.
Yeah, I think your dreams were a little bit more loftier than mine. Mine was I wanted to be a band director. 'Cause I
Ah.
was drum major and like all that stuff, and so I wanted to go into music to teach and to direct. But yeah, that was why it didn't last long, but I did start off initially as a music major. Okay, cool. Now I
Cool.
want to pivot back into kind of your career. So you may know this and be able to articulate this, but I know some people who may be listening don't necessarily understand or maybe understand the differences. And I had to coach someone through this earlier because they labeled their work as commercial, and commercial can mean a lot of things.
Hmm.
So,
Mhm.
um, what is the difference for you between like working at an ad agency and then because you specifically use this language like entertainment marketing? So, what's the difference
Mhm.
between like entertainment marketing and ad agency? Because if you the work can feel and look similar, but tell us a little bit about what it was like to work in both and what's the difference between the two.
Yeah, it's funny that um, I didn't think that they were going to be as similar as they are. They are very similar, in my opinion. I think that ultimately you're selling a product, whether that is an actual product that you can buy off a shelf, or a brand, or a movie or a film. Like it doesn't. It's not something that you are looking at for just pure enjoyment. You are actually going to make a purchase or do something in response to what you saw. So um, there's that, but I do think that the industries themselves are pretty different. The work that you do at an ad agency is an industry that has been established for a long time and has had a lot of time to mature and become more of like a corporate entity. There's always been a lot more um, focus on the direct sales that are involved in advertising. So you are working directly with people who are focused on that very robust industry that is the sales and marketing of products.
Mhm.
That world felt much more like there were a lot more checks and balances in terms of the corporate side of the finance, even approvals, making sure there's a lot of research about anything and everything on these brands and products. Entertainment has followed suit somewhat, but it has not been like that for as long as advertising has. So there's a lot of it that felt kind of run and gun for a long time. I think my first reaction to working in entertainment marketing, the first time was like, oh, there's no like account people, and there's no the producer is also going out and budgeting and making all the client decisions with the client, and then they're also approving all the cuts. Like, how is all this landing on the same person or the same team? And that is just different. It just hasn't been done another way. Things have changed a bit with digital marketing and the way that industry has kind of exploded since when I was working in
Mhm.
advertising. So things have changed a little bit and evolved with the natural progression of the industry. But um, honestly, I think that it's similar in a lot of ways in terms of the work you're doing.
Yeah.
There's still a client that approves everything. And sometimes you get a client that wants to be highly creative, and sometimes you get a client that is very rigid about you have to do it a certain way. So you're always, at the mercy of what the type of work is, the client and the team that you're working with. So the other thing is, I worked at a large agency that was very traditional, and then I worked at a smaller um, kind of boutique level agency at the time, and that was also very different. It felt like we had the roles of like account folks and creative teams, and um, a lot of the same infrastructure that existed on the larger scale, but it was a lot scrappier.
Yeah.
And I got closer to the work and really kind of like began to really see how the nuts and bolts kind of were put together. And I learned a lot more actually on the smaller side. So um, that's two different ways that the traditional ad agency world affected me in my early career.
Yeah. Um, you hit on something there about small versus large, and I'd want to get into that, right? Because some people listening might be, do I go to entertainment marketing? Do I go to ad agency? Do I go to a corporate world? Do I go to a big agency, small agency? So, what are some of the pros and cons, and maybe what would you recommend for someone who's thinking about getting into a creative career? Where should they start, especially when it comes to like this, like promotional stuff, right? Never mind the
Yeah,
long form editors that are trying to make features and stuff like that, right? This is more
yeah.
your, you know, everyday editor, producer, motion graphics person. Like, what would you recommend for people?
Um, Honestly, I think that having exposure to both sides is really key. If you don't make it to one side or the other, that's not to say that you can't experience it, because on the agency side, you're seeing a lot of it by working with teams at the clients that are sending you the work. So it's not like you don't have a vision of like what that could be. But I learned a lot on both sides. Um, I will say that I like a lot of people, I think the dream for a while was to be somewhere big, because you would get to affect more, you would get to work on a lot more of a variety of things, and there was a certain amount of autonomy that you could potentially have over the work itself. The
Hmm.
perception, right? I think once you get there, there are so many other factors that you don't realize are going to be involved in the journey that is like your experience as a creative or an creative operations person. There's so many other things that factor into whether you can get that work done that you thought you were going to get, or that you thought you were going to do. um, and there's a lot more personal, how do I want to put it? I think it's more like you have to figure out the team dynamics of what you're coming into,
Yeah.
that you don't think would be an issue when you think of a big place. You're like, oh, you just go there and you do something amazing. And there's so many other things happening. There will be somebody to help me with that, and we'll figure it out. I mean, it's not that simple. I wasn't thinking that, but I think one of the things that you don't realize on the larger size, whether that's an ad agency or a streamer or a studio, is that there are also factors and caveats that they're up against, that affect the type of work that a team can do, that a department can do, that a region can do. And so
Hmm.
you are given all these other caveats of like, yes, you are going to do this, but these are all the things that you have to work around or with or think about when you're planning all these other things that you're going to work on. So it's not like this like free form, like the world is at your
Yeah.
feet kind of situation. It is like there are challenges and a lot of unique scenarios that you have to navigate up there too. So on the creative agency side, when I was initially working at agencies prior to doing that, I had seen some of the challenges, and most of the time, this was pre-COVID, but a lot of the biggest challenges were financial, where it was like, what are we going to do with these tight budgets? How are we going to get this work done with such like compressed, condensed timelines? Um, and those were what you think of as non-factors for a large client or a streamer or a studio. Like, oh, they can make the rules, right? So
Right.
what's so hard?
Yeah.
um,
There's something
so those are
you
two different challenges there.
Yeah, there was something you said earlier about, when you're in a smaller agency, you get to learn a lot of things, and right, and I think that's something that people kind of take for granted, don't truly understand, right? To your point, for me,
Yeah.
like my first real job, really was at Zappos back in the day, and I was like employee 40, right? And you look at how big it is
Mhm.
now; it's like 4,000, 5,000 people.
Yeah.
But it was like if there was a job to be done, there was nobody there to do it. So like either didn't get done or you just figure out how to do it. Right. And so it's almost like learning on the fly, right? It's like the master
Yeah.
class, but it's actually it's real life. It's not theoretical. Right. And then I
Yeah.
learned a lot of like my foundational philosophies in that time. So no matter where I went, I remember like, oh, I had to do that. So I know a little bit about what it takes to do that. So like I can do that here, I can do that here. And to your point also at some place like Netflix, like at the beginning when I joined, it felt like that. But then, when it got to like 15,000 employees, you now feel like this cog in this giant machine where it's like I'm really good at this one thing, and that's all they're asking me to really be really good at this one thing. They're not really asking me to expand, which for some people that's good too, right? There's generalists and
Yeah.
there's specialists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's an important thing to also understand, that the generalist specialist definition is really important to figure out. And if you want to play that part or be in that role at the place you're going to, like and also if it's something that a team can define for you when you come in, like, do you want me just doing this? Or do I need to be thinking bigger picture and have a hand in a lot of different things? And that's what my area and my purview is.
Yeah. So you brought up some interesting things too, because you were in agency life, um, pre-COVID and post-COVID. And so I never was internal at an agency. I've always been on the client side, and I've always built internal studios no matter where I went. So I'd love to hear like what cultures and maybe the industry was like pre-COVID and maybe what it is like now, and then there's even pre-strike, post-strike. But let's talk about
Yeah.
pre-COVID, post-COVID. Like what things have changed, what things have been the same, and what do you see as the future for agencies?
It's kind of funny. When I was agency side prior to Netflix, and it was pre-COVID, um, there was not really a focus on the role that I found myself doing, which was creative operations. Like I said, I came from producing, so I was at agencies doing production management, which sort of touches on some of the aspects of operations, but isn't. It feels much more project based and focused on the process of those projects and getting those through the door, right?
Hmm.
So at that time, I really had to kind of prove out why it was so important to have operations practices and to have somebody focused on the bigger picture, not just scheduling, not just thinking about getting projects out the door on time, but also thinking about the efficiency of a team,
Hmm.
um, the general, like, also just well-being of the creatives who are working on it, and so that they feel like they're not just managed and scheduled, but that they are thriving and they have a chance to work in the right way that makes them perform at their best. So that was something I had to constantly make sure that I was proving out. And if I had to describe it to other agencies that I wasn't at, to just that were like, what do you do? Like, you're production managing, or what is it? I would have to say like, well, I'm also thinking about overall creative health of the agency and the creatives that work there. I'm thinking about utilization. I'm thinking about um, bandwidth. I'm thinking about, the talent makeup. What does this team look like, and where is the industry going? Do we have the right cast of creatives working on this type of work? So it felt like I was in this weird gray area where there weren't a lot of me. um, and then post COVID, I think because the industry took such a halt and then really had a rough time coming back, um, it was tough to catch up to those budgets and to get to that place where people felt like they could operate in the same way. And so there was a focus all of a sudden on efficiency and operations. And not only that, there were a lot more agencies popping up. People
Hmm.
wanted to do their own thing. I've seen so many new agencies pop up post COVID that I'm like, wow, that's amazing. I never heard of that place. That's great. They're thriving.
Yeah.
um, and this obviously before strikes and all of that, it felt like people could look around and be like, am I happy doing this here? Does this team work well? And that wasn't necessarily a question before. It was just like, who's working on the coolest stuff? I want to work there. Um, I think people now have a focus on like, at least on the personal creative level, like, am I fulfilled here? Does this place have the right philosophy when it comes to doing the work, and feeling good about it? Am I working at a factory? Like, do
Yeah.
I feel like I'm just a cog and I'm just being stuck into whatever comes my way and I just got to do it? Or do I feel like this place really is thinking about the type of work we're getting and casting the right people? Or the other side of it being like, from the management side, do I feel like people are thinking about efficiency in the right way? Do I think that people are just pushing to get all this work in and not really planning it out? Or do we feel like we could be strategic somewhere and think about things differently and actually plan out an operational model that you can scale in different ways? So that's exciting to me. When I started looking around, I was like, let's see what agencies are doing now. Like, I thought it
Yeah.
was just going to be something that was tough to navigate, and I was actually really surprised at how different people were thinking about the creative team makeup and the operations of those teams. So it was refreshing, and I'm really glad that I was able to find the right place for me.
Yeah.
But I'm also like, I poked around a little bit, and on on the streaming side, I will say it's still, it's tough to navigate that part of it because I think things that are larger move slower. And sometimes it's tough to change the mentality of a large team makeup.
Hmm.
Whereas agencies are they've had to be so nimble for so long that if we want to try to shake stuff up, it's a little bit easier to shake up a smaller team than it is like a behemoth machine that's been doing it this way forever. So,
Yeah. I mean, I used to use this analogy for that exact example is like trying to turn the Titanic, right? Because
yeah,
if you have this huge boat, and why some big companies can't shift their culture fast enough is because they have this giant machine, but this like little itty bitty rudder, right? That's trying to turn them and steer them, and that's equivalent to like maybe you have a tiger team, maybe you have some sort of committee that's trying to change culture, but when you have like
yeah,
20,000 people trying to listen to five, it doesn't work. But if you're at an agency of like say 150, those five voices are much louder.
yeah.
um, but there was something interesting you mentioned about like pre-COVID, post-COVID, and then I want to understand the strikes. But pre-COVID being like who does the coolest stuff, post-COVID being like am I aligned or do I feel fulfilled creatively or just in general in this place? Do you see that mentality sticking? Is that something you still see? And then has it continued after the strikes? Like what is that sentiment like now in agency world or just creative world in general?
I think that initially after COVID, people realized that you could shift gears. And there was, I mean, it's been said in a lot of different places, but people thought about the quality of their life and like how important it was to be in an office and to be happy with the work that you're doing. people had to make decisions about whether or not they wanted to stay or go back to a situation where they were either doing the things that they were happy doing or they weren't quite as happy as they thought they were. So I think when we came back from everything, agencies did have to do some reconciling with those new perspectives that people had. Part of it being like the in office versus hybrid versus remote. And that's an ongoing conversation in a lot of places still.
Hmm.
But I think that there's also a bigger picture question of, is this the right way to do the work? And are the people doing the work making progress? Are we doing things in a new, interesting way? And are we allowing our creatives to have the opportunity to think differently, to make us do things in a new, interesting, creative way? Because you can't shove things through the same
Right.
gears and expect something new if you are constantly grinding those gears and people feel like they're stuck. So it's had to be a shakeup of somewhat on both sides. So people also have had to be like aware that we're going back into an industry that is coming back and getting healthier again. And that means that those deadlines are coming back and that the expectation that you're going to have to jump back into the seat and like get into some of the crazy work schedules and deadlines sometimes is also happening from time to time. So it's it's been an adjustment on both sides.
Yeah.
And then I think post strike remains to be seen, really. Like this week, um, we were just talking about it being like uh, something that people are saying across the board is like survive till 25. So a lot of people are like, we'll talk next year, see if that's that. We'll check and see what things are like next year because right now we're not back and we're still figuring it out. I think a lot of things have been because of the strikes. A lot of things got pushed, things got rescheduled, and so the from an operations perspective, it's just it looks crazy. Like some things were all condensed into Q4. Some things were like, oh, we got to do this right now. Ooh, let's go.
Yeah.
So it's just been unpredictable. So we're kind of waiting for things. And honestly, I don't know if things will ever be fully as predictable as they were, like a release schedule and regular deadlines. I'm like, is it gone forever? I don't know. We'll see. I hope not.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, right? Because like streaming has been much bigger and there can be fungible deadlines, right? Or
Yeah.
launch dates, because there's so much coming out. But I'm curious, I'm wanting to see too, because the last time there were strikes like this, it was almost like the next 10 years was like the golden era of television. There was such amazing entertainment that came out
Yeah.
after the writer strikes, if you remember.
Hmm.
And I think that's when a lot of these businesses and agencies and studios and everyone was thriving. I mean, Netflix came out of that with like how many original titles,
Yeah.
and there
I
was just
remember when I
so much
started, it
great
was like
content.
so many big titles that were like Netflix has got it all.
Right. And then now there's more players and there's just like more resources, even though, yeah, like
Yeah.
the industry is going through a shakeup now. There's been mergers and layoffs and all these things. But after the last strike, I'm optimistic. But to your point, maybe it's not we'll thrive in 25, but maybe we'll see in 2025 what that is like. Um, I wanted to go back a little bit because you were talking about because this is creative leadership with heart. So you went from leading creative projects to leading creatives. So what were some of the differences and what are the things you love and what are some of the challenges you face with leading creative teams?
Yeah, I think the thing that I loved is collaboration. Like even when I was producing, one of the things I loved about producing is that you get to work with people to make something happen. And that's like for me one of my creative tenets that I love working in this industry for, which is I get to work with talented people in collaboration and make something amazing. Whether that's making sure that a lot of things happen or one particular really special project, ultimately it's working with a lot of people and hearing how they see something and working on something together to be a collaborative project. Um, I think that when I first started doing operations or production managing, I thought that I wasn't going to feel good about it because it felt so tangential to the collaboration. I thought, oh, well, the collaborators are going to be the creatives themselves and the producers that are working on the projects, and I won't get to touch that. Maybe it won't be as fun. Um, but I actually found that in operations, the collaboration with leadership, with team leads, with managers, and with people that were also experiencing team management in the same way that I was just as well, it was just as, if not more fulfilling for me, because I really enjoyed working with people and I liked hearing about um, what their ways of working were like for their teams. I thoroughly enjoy working with like creative leadership, people who are managing the creatives themselves. I also thoroughly enjoy working with like our finance and HR and other leadership that really gets to have a say so in the shape of a bigger organization.
Hmm.
And then we get to hear from each other like, oh, I didn't realize that that's how that affects you. And how are you dealing with that on your team? Maybe we can borrow some of those philosophies. Like we are actually sharing and collaborating on how to run a bigger machine, for lack of better terms. It's like we are making something work in different ways, and we're the experts in these little pockets of it that are all going to make it work together.
And what are some of the, I would imagine the flip side of that are the challenges, right? When you come up against
Yeah.
places that are very siloed, or like speak to some of the things that you, the, let's call them opportunities that we used to call them all the time.
Mm-hmm.
What were
Yeah.
some of the opportunities that you've seen across your career when dealing with some of these same teams and your own teams?
Yeah. Yeah. I think the biggest challenges are like knowing that we have outside factors, that there are certain things that aren't going to change about this industry. There are certain things that aren't going to change about the clients that we work with, that we get projects from. So rather than try to push back or really fight it in a way that doesn't feel like you're going to find success, how do we adapt, and how do we look internally at the makeup of a team? How do we look up? How do we look at the way that we've set up our ways of working and our workflows to make something happen? And if you're at a place that doesn't want to do that, or has leadership or leaders that are not very malleable in terms of their ways of thinking, or even their like appetite for change, it's like
Hmm.
a philosophical issue. I think you have to be willing to think about things differently and have a little bit of humility about your expertise. And that's one of the things that I think became challenging at some places I've worked at in the past, where people didn't think that that was going to work because they've seen that before, or they've tried that in the past and it's never worked. Um, but this is, I mean, the industry is a living, breathing organism that changes and evolves constantly, and we are changing along with it. And so you can't, there's no like destination to getting it right. Like there's no like, and we fixed it and we're never going to have to change it again. Like
Yeah.
everything has to evolve at some point, because things change, the industry changes, the work changes, the creative makeup of your team will change, people will come and go. So there will always be something to adjust and to improve and to try to just like refine. So I think that's the biggest challenge, is getting people to see that there's not a destination for it, and there's not going to be a right way and that's it. There's going to be a conversation about it, and we're going to pick the direction that this moving thing is going in.
Yeah. I mean, you said it well when it's the, I don't want to even call it old hat, but it's the, we've done that before, right? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I've seen that. I've seen people dig in two places in my career, and both were proven wrong. One was you can't sell shoes online, right? Was like that what people would say at us as Apple's like they're not going to last very long. You just can't sell shoes online,
Wow.
and here
Yeah.
it is, what 20 some odd 25 years later, still selling shoes online, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then when I got to Netflix in 2012, they said video promotions don't work.
Hmm.
Um, Well, I mean, you and I both know that that's
Right.
not true, right? And to your
Yeah.
point, the reason why is because people evolve, technology evolves, context evolves, like all those things,
Mm-hmm.
right? So yeah, maybe in 2010 when they first tested video, you know, I don't know if they had gigabit speeds, right? I don't know if they had the
Yeah.
technology and all the things that we had. Plus, YouTube was only two years old. Like video
Mm-hmm.
online was annoying at best
Yeah.
back
It was
then, right?
choppy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, to your point, like, if you just sit on your laurels or you just sit on your old way of doing things, it'll be hard and do need to evolve. Um,
Yeah,
I didn't prep you
agreed.
for this one. I just want to ask. So, what if you were to say what leadership style you have? What would you say is your leadership style?
Oh, I think, and I've been asked this before on interviews, and it's always like it hasn't changed as I've thought about it and over the years. I'm a transparent leader. I think about it as giving as much context as possible for my team to be able to operate without reliance on wondering whether or not I'm gonna agree to something or approve of something. um, but I also want to make sure that I am working with a team that I can trust, that I can give information and context to, and will make wise decisions and have good judgment. So there's a lot of that um, that's one of the reasons I like being a leader is you can cultivate that in a team. You can bring that to your leadership style and grow that within your own team too, so that they can have that open conversation with you about whatever comes their way. So probably the biggest piece of my leadership style that I really cling to over the years.
Yeah, love it. I mean, you can never go wrong with that. I've even been told I'm transparent to a fault, but I don't believe that.
I mean, I catch myself too, where I'm like, maybe I should have held on to that one for a little bit.
Yeah, but I mean, at least they know. I'd better
Yeah.
people know than not, right?
Yes, I
Um,
would rather swing that way than the other way. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. I'm not a very secretive person. Okay, so now thinking about your career and everything you've learned so far, everything you've experienced, what would you tell your younger self or anyone who is thinking about the same career path as you? What advice would you give them?
Yeah, I was thinking about this, and there was all these little ways that I felt like I could have done something differently, or if I would have not gotten hung up on one thing or another, it wouldn't have been such a holdback for me. But I think the bigger picture answer to that is I would tell myself to get out of my own way because I think those of us who um, either are just very analytical of ourselves or can be very like internal, um, you start to second guess yourself. Same thing happens with imposter syndrome when you're somewhere. But I think that the biggest thing that you can overcome is the way that you think about yourself and your actions in your own head. So I would tell myself not to worry about like I'm prejudging myself or my decisions or my actions or the way that I present something because I want it to be perfect, or I think that if I mess up it's the end of the world, when really no one is holding me to this like perfect standard. I think that we're all being asked to do our best, and if you prepare, you're going to do the best you can. You've been brought to a team for that reason. um, I would tell myself to stop being in my head about it and just do it. Like,
Yeah.
get out of my own head and get out of my own like internalized doubt, and to just try things. And if it fails, that's why we step up and do something differently. But it's there's so much more positive to reap on the other side of that in trying something. There's so much more to learn there. So
Yeah.
that's what I would tell my younger self.
That's so good. And it's like you said, it's our only mostly it's our own inner narrative, right? It's a lot of these
Hmm.
things that we think that are negative about ourselves. We're just telling ourselves nobody's telling us these things. No one's
I
telling you
know.
you're terrible
Like,
at
who
this.
is that?
Yeah. But it's because, you know, it comes back to like our doubt, our self-doubt, our imposter syndrome. Like, am I really as good as people think I am?
Yeah.
And when are they going to
Yeah.
find out I'm not? That is not as good as they think I am. But reality is you got to where you were not because of luck, but because of merit, talent,
Yeah.
like all the things. Like we are our culmination of experiences. Like I mean, that's the way we can define ourselves. And that's good, bad, the ugly, professional, personal. That's who we are.
Yep.
Right. So like
Life.
bring as long as you bring all that to you, you're gonna try to your work or to your relationships or whatever, you're gonna do your best. Like you're not gonna half-ass your way through it. At least
No.
maybe most people won't. Some people might.
Yeah. I mean, if you're sitting in your seat looking at your phone, just like scrolling around, you're not probably doing your best. So,
Yeah, that's a whole nother thing. That's another podcast. That's not this one.
yeah, we'll go there another time.
Okay, cool. So I wanted to ask what role, because this was a huge thing for me, mentorship and coaching, but what role did mentorship and coaching play for you throughout your journey? And is there anyone that you'd like to name out? You don't have to, but is there anyone you'd want to call out?
Yeah, a long time ago, I worked with some really awesome creative directors that gave me the lay of the land of the agency world. Um, Toby Barlow was one of the first creative directors who believed in me as a producer and a very junior level producer and was like, "You're going to learn. You're going to figure it out. You might do it the wrong way, but you seem to have the right idea." So it was nice to have somebody believe in me as inexperienced as I was. Um, and then as I grew in my career and I got to a place where I was production managing and then doing operations on the agency side, Margaret Hinch was working as an HR VP at the agency I was at, and she was just amazing to work with. She had an emotional intelligence about her that I was always striving to be at. I think that she became, to me, the type of leader that I wanted to be one day. And so I definitely looked up to her as somebody that I wanted to emulate in my leadership style. And she's still doing amazing work through Thought Lens, her company, and the other agencies and companies that she works for too. So she's a big mentor for me and still is. She's a great friend. So
Nice.
shout out to Margaret.
Yeah. Shout out, Margaret. And one last question is, I'm big on books and things like that, but are there any books? What's one book you would recommend to anyone in the industry thinking about stepping into leadership roles, maybe thinking agency or client side? But what's one book that you would recommend, or maybe one that's helped you along the way?
Sure. I am at, knowing that there is probably a lot of people that have read these books and that we've all like overlapped on a lot of them. I called it out, but Emotional Intelligence is actually a book through the Harvard Business Review
Hmm.
that was my first introduction into like learning leadership styles. And so that was a good intro one for me. It's a good way to like just kind of understand how that style of the way that you approach the work is just as important as the way that you do it. Um, and then I read another really good one that I think made the rounds a couple of years ago called Multipliers. Um,
It's a good one.
that
Liz
one was
Wiseman. Yeah.
yes, Liz Wiseman. So
Yeah.
I read that one and was like, oh, there's so many good nuggets in here. I think I even highlighted the whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yellow.
So
I
that's a
mean, it
good
helps
one.
that the book is yellow.
Yeah, it's like you can always find it on the shelf.
Yeah. The
Yeah.
the thing that was most gold for me in that one was the accidental diminishers, because I was doing those
Mm-hmm.
things left and right.
Oh
But
yeah,
you,
I felt very seen in some of
yeah,
those
right.
too.
Yeah. I'm like, oh
Yeah.
no.
Oh no, I can't believe I did that.
Yeah. But those are great recommendations. And thank you for
Yeah.
that. And if people want to get in touch, what's a good way for people to get in touch with you?
Yeah, I'm more than happy to connect with people on LinkedIn. It's through like my email, which is G Del Toro. So Graciela Del Toro on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Or in any other sense, like if I've worked with people in the past, I'm happy to like set up time. Or if there's somebody that wants to reach out to potentially just pick my brain about something, I'm always down for that too. I'm also part of Soapbox, which is a female-led organization that uplifts like women and marginalized genders to just navigate this industry and to find mentorship and leadership skills. So I work with that group a lot, and if there are people who want to join that, they're more than welcome to look it up too.
Yeah. I'll link to Soapbox in
Yeah,
the
shout
show
out to
notes.
Soapbox too.
Yeah, for sure. I may be reaching out to them. I had heard a little bit about them, but I may reach out to you to get a little bit more information.
Yeah,
Um,
sure.
cool. Well, thank you, Graciela, for taking the time to chat with us today. I know you can be busy, so thanks again for taking that time. And thank you everyone for listening to another episode of Creative Leadership with Heart. We will see you next time. Thanks again.
Thanks, Rico.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Creative Leadership with Heart. If you enjoyed the show, please like and subscribe. If you're ready to make huge, lasting change in your life, then what are you waiting for? What will your life look like if you took action today? What would it look like if you didn't? If you're serious and you're ready, book your free strategy session today and let's make your future a reality.